Hey everybody, for my playthrough for Tragedy Looper, I want to do something a little bit different, something a little bit entertaining, something that's befitting the game of Tragedy Looper. Because Tragedy Looper is a game as much about the gameplay mechanics as it is about the theme for the game itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a run through of the game, showing you the very first scenario for the game. So a big warning right here, there's going to be tons and tons of spoilers here. And you're probably not going to be able to play the learning scenario for the game, but that shouldn't be a big deal for you because I'm teaching you how to play the game. If you know how to play the game, you should be able to bypass the training scenario in the first place. But what I'm going to do is, I'm going to play this from a different standpoint. I'm going to play this from the standpoint of the Mastermind, which means as I play, I'm going to be pretty much silent as the Mastermind, and I'm going to go through every day, every loop. I'm going to have you figure out exactly what's going on. That way you can figure out how Tragedy Looper plays. You get the theme for the game. Just give me a chance to have a little bit of fun with some video editing after I go through everything and put this video together. You all have the power to travel back in time. Maybe it's a strange wristwatch that you found in an old antique shop, or it's the weird mobile phone application that your mad scientist grandfather developed, or a magical diary. You don't know what gives you this ability, but it doesn't matter. You have this power and you're using it. However, now and then tragedies occur where you are deeply involved. Your typical reaction is, of course, to travel back in time and behave differently so the tragedy doesn't happen. Up until now, that has worked well enough. However, this time, something is different. Whatever you do, it seems the tragedy is intent on happening anyway. In other ways, with other methods, or if not, something else horrible happens instead. So naturally you go back again, but to no avail, it still happens. So you go back and repeat, and go back and repeat, again and again and again. But the spiral of tragedy seems to be unstoppable. Going repeatedly back in time, you notice two things. The first is that someone, somewhere, is pulling the strings for tragedies to happen. The second thing is that there are other individuals who also keep traveling back, trying to avoid the same horrors. You've already failed this loop one time, so you have a little bit of information. You know it's the 1980s, so cell phones have not been invented yet, so you're going to have limited opportunities to talk to your fellow loopers. You also know there's going to be two major tragedies that are going to happen. You know on the second day, there's going to be a horrible murder. On the third day, there's going to be a suicide. If you don't figure out what's going on by the end of the fourth day, you're going to loop back. You only have 3 chances to figure out what's going on before history is going to be permanently changed, and the repercussions will suffer throughout time will be horrendous. All the pieces are now in play. It's now time for the Mastermind to work their intrigues to change history. Each one of our heroes, let's now go out among the city, maybe to the hospital, maybe the shrine, or maybe to the school, possibly interacting with any of the characters in this scenario, trying to figure out what's going on so they can get to the bottom of this loop and save history. So our very first player decides that they're going to go ahead and try to use some goodwill with some of the NPCs in the adventure because they know some of the powers of some of these NPCs can help them solve the loop. So this player right here who has the magical diary, they're going to go visit the Shrine Maiden. Again, they can't tell the other players what card they're playing, but they can definitely discuss what they're doing before they're heading out to visit the NPCs. This player's done with their action card. The next player needs to make a decision. They decide that they're going to go out and talk to the police officer and see what they can do to interact with the police officer to possibly get to the bottom of this tragedy. And then finally, the final player also decides that they're going to head out and just talk to one of the NPCs, also to see if they can find a good way to help them get to the bottom of this tragedy. So they also decide to go visit the office worker, who they have a funny feeling may be involved somehow, since they see that the Mastermind is pulling their strings. Now it's time to reveal what has happened from playing our cards on the various locations in the city on the various characters. First thing we're going to do is we're going to reveal exactly what's happening to the doctor, and then the heroes are going to notice that the doctor has managed to establish some level of paranoia somehow. Now remember, paranoia is used to trigger bad events, and our heroes do know that there's going to be a murder. They also know there's going to be a suicide, but they don't know who the culprit is, and they don't know if that's going to involve any of the key players, or if it just happens to be a red herring to cause difficulties for our heroes. This card is removed, returned to the Mastermind stack. We're now going to move on to the next person, which is going to be the Shrine Maiden. We're going to see that one of our heroes has decided to burn their +2 goodwill ability, deciding that if they can manage to get enough goodwill onto the Shrine Maiden, they can use her final ability, which will help our heroes discover exactly what is going on behind this tragedy. This goodwill card is actually removed for this loop since it's a 1 use per loop. It's given back to our player, but it's going to be left face up to let them know that they can no longer use this card. We're now going to go ahead and resolve all the cards that are currently in the city. We're going to see that we have a +1 paranoia and a +1 goodwill card played on the office worker. So the office worker is going to gain 2 goodwill. Apparently this person wants to use this character's ability to reveal this character's role very, very badly, which could be a clue for our heroes to figure out what's going on. But there's also an additional clue that they're going to see there's a little bit of paranoia on them. This is a 1 per tragedy or a 1 per loop card. It's going to be returned to this player. The Mastermind is going to get that card back and return to his hand. And then we're going to see exactly what happens to the police officer. We're going to see that they're also going to get +2 goodwill. Apparently this player also thinks that maybe using the goodwill abilities of the police officer can also help them get to the bottom of this tragedy. Again, like the other goodwill cards, it's 1 use per loop, so it's given back to the player, but they cannot add it back to their hand. They've lost that card for this round. And then finally, the Mastermind is going to play their final card on the girl student. She's going to go ahead and move. She's going to leave the school, and she's going to head to the shrine. This card is going to return to the Mastermind. None of the players have any abilities that they can play. The Mastermind does not have any intrigue abilities or any special abilities they want to play on any of the characters in this scenario. None of the goodwill counters have tallied up far enough for any of our heroes to use any of the goodwill powers. So now that we're done with all of that, we know there's no incidents on the first day, so we don't have to worry about any incidents. So the next thing that's going to happen is the leader card is going to move down to the next player. And then finally, at this point, the Mastermind lets the players know that the girl student has died, they've lost, and the loop now ends. Now our protagonists need to take a couple minutes and discuss what they know based on the clues they've managed to uncover so far, and they have found some clues. They do know that the girl student died, and her death has caused the loop to end. Do we now know her role? Do we know why she died? Can we look at the other roles and try to figure out what has killed her? Can we use the information we've gained now to try to figure out exactly which plots are now going on? Can we now try to figure out what we need to prevent to do in the second loop to prevent exactly the exact same thing from happening all over again? These are all the decisions our loopers need to figure out to try to stop this tragedy from occurring a second time. It's now time for our protagonists to retry the loop and see if they can stop the tragedy from happening. And now our heroes must decide exactly what they want to do, starting with the leader who needs to decide exactly how they want to interact with the scenario and stopping the tragedy from happening. Our very first hero decides that they didn't like exactly what happened the last time they went through this loop, so they decide that they're going to go ahead and visit the schoolgirl with an effort to try to stop prior tragedies from happening all over again. Our second protagonist has decided that they're going to go ahead and visit the police officer, seeing if they can find a way to get the police officer to help them to try to get to the bottom of this horrible murder, or maybe even to the bottom of this horrible suicide. And even though they realize that the Shrine Maiden possibly may not be working for their best interests, they do realize that she does have some abilities that might help them save this loop. It's now time for the Mastermind to reveal exactly what's going to happen during this loop. The very first thing is the doctor is going to go ahead and decide that he wants to leave the hospital, and he's going to head to the city, much to the chagrin of our protagonist. The next thing that's going to happen is the Shrine Maiden is going to go ahead and gain some goodwill. Hopefully she can reveal some information for our heroes that's going to allow them to get to the bottom of this crime and figure out exactly what is going on. The next thing that's going to happen is that the office worker is going to start gaining just a little bit of paranoia. The police officer is going to be met by this protagonist who's going to try to bring some goodwill and try to see if they can get this police officer to help them get to the bottom of this tragedy. And then finally, this player decides that they don't want the exact same thing that happened last time, where the schoolgirl went up and visited the shrine maiden, assuming that this is a movement card, and assuming completely wrong. This girl student decides to leave the school and head out into the city, where things are a little bit dangerous, and she gains just a little bit of paranoia. And then this player gets their card back, since it's not a once per loop card. You start to notice that there's a little bit of paranoia building up in the city, and it seems to be affecting the office worker. Our protagonists don't have any goodwill abilities that they can play because there's not enough goodwill on any of the characters in the story involved yet, so the leader is going to change hands. No instances are going to occur on this day. We're now going to move up to day 2, where our heroes know there's going to be a tragedy occurring. They know that there's going to be a murder. It's now day 2 and time for the Mastermind to go ahead and start playing their cards to increase the intrigue in the scenario. After the Mastermind has played all their cards, it's now time for the heroes to play their cards and try to stop exactly what's going to happen to prevent anything bad from happening, based on all the knowledge they have from the very first loop and all the knowledge they have from the very first day. So starting with the leader, they're going to look at all their cards and they get to decide which one of the NPCs they want to go visit. So our leader decides that using their knowledge, looking at what strings the Mastermind is pulling, they decide to play a card right here on top of the girl student. The next player in order looks at all the things that are available, decides what they want to do, what can help them the most, and decides that they want to go visit the police officer, so they play a card on top of the police officer. And then finally, our final looper decides that they also want to help get to the bottom of things, using all the information they've gained so far from the prior loop, from the prior day, and they decide they're going to go ahead and visit the office worker and try to see if they can get to the bottom of things and help them with this situation to find out exactly just what is going on. Now that all of our players have played their cards, it's time to reveal them and see exactly what is going to happen to all of our NPCs. The very first thing we're going to see is that the office worker is going to go ahead and gain 2 goodwill. Apparently this player wants to get some goodwill with this office worker and use his ability to find out exactly what his role in the scenario just happens to be. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to reveal the cards that happen to be on the police officer. We're going to see that this player has decided they also want to get some goodwill with the police officer in an effort to try to use his special investigative powers to try to get to the bottom of things and figure out exactly what's going on. Although for some reason the Mastermind has decided that they want to move this card up here with the Shrine Maiden, which is a big shocker for all of our players, because they now realize that if what they believe is true, they may lose access to the police officer very, very quickly. The next thing we're going to do is this player thinks that they're very clever, playing a forbidden movement on the girl student because they assumed the girl student was going to move up here to be with the Shrine Maiden, forcing a loss for our players, but unfortunately that's not what our Mastermind did. They decided to put a little bit more paranoia on the girl student, and now our heroes are puzzled as they try to figure out exactly what all this paranoia is going to do to our heroes to make their life more difficult. And then finally, the boy student decides to move into the city, adding more puzzle, more questions for all of our heroes as they try to figure out exactly what is going on. It's time for our Mastermind to use any abilities that they wish to use. Our Mastermind doesn't want to do that. Next, it's time for our heroes to use any goodwill abilities that they may have. Unfortunately, don't have enough goodwill in any of the NPCs quite yet to use any of their abilities. So now we move on to the incident step, where the Mastermind informs all of our heroes that the girl student has died, they've lost, and the loop has ended. And now again, it's up to our protagonists to use the clues to try to figure out if they get further along to get to the bottom of this mystery. They've seen some extra things happen. They've made it to the second day. They've seen an incident, and they need to put all these clues together to try to figure out exactly what roles are occurring in this scenario, what main plot's going on, what subplot exactly is going on. We've seen a couple new things since we went to the second day. We've seen that the Mastermind was able to play a paranoia token just by using somebody's abilities. So we can look at the list and see, are there any roles that allow you to play paranoia tokens during the Mastermind's play abilities phase? So is that going to give us another clue? Is that going to give us another clue about what the main plot may be? Does that give us another clue about the subplot? We've also seen somebody die during the incident step, which means that somebody had to have enough paranoia on them to cause that incident to occur. We know that maybe the incident was a murder. Well, we definitely know the incident was a murder because it's listed on the card. So we know on day 2 there was a murder. We know somebody was murdered. Their death has caused the loop to end. And we know possibly who has killed them. So let's wrap everything up, move to the third loop, and see if we get to the bottom of everything before the Mastermind permanently changes history, ruining all the fun for our protagonists. We're now getting into our third and final loop. This is basically the end of the game for our heroes, or victory for our heroes if they can figure out exactly what is going on. For those of you playing along at home, you should know by now what 4 roles have been revealed in the game so far. And if you're puzzled as to what roles we've seen so far in the game, realize that we've seen somebody die. We've seen them die 2 different ways. We've seen somebody gain some paranoia, and we've seen that every time somebody dies, the tragedy has caused a loop to end, causing failure for our heroes. So we know at least 4 of the roles in the game, so that should help us figure out exactly what 2 scenarios are going on here. And if we can figure out what 2 scenarios are going on, we know what the Mastermind is trying to do to win. So now we just need to figure out how to stop the Mastermind. The first thing we're going to do, we are in the third and final loop the very first day. So the Mastermind is simply going to start the turn by placing their cards on various NPCs on the board, trying to cause as much confusion for our heroes as possible as they try to balance and look at all the things they know about this scenario, who's involved, what their roles are in this scenario, and try to make various things happening. And am I playing cards for movement? Am I playing cards for causing paranoia? Maybe for intrigue. Why am I playing those cards? That's the stuff their heroes need to now figure out in this final loop before I win the game. It's now up to our heroes to try to figure out exactly what they're going to do to try to save the day. So starting with the very first hero, they're going to look at their hand of cards and look at everything that's happened so far and know that if things happen in certain ways, things are going to go very south for them very, very quickly. So this protagonist decides the very first thing that they're going to do is they're going to play a card right here on top of this Mastermind card, thinking they have an idea of exactly what card that Mastermind's decided to play this round. The next hero in line is going to look at all their cards and try to figure out exactly what they're going to do. They're going to look at all their options and look at ways they can stop the bad things from happening before, knowing that various things cause them various problems. And again, they have a good idea of just exactly what is going on in the scenario. So this player is going to play their card also. And then finally, the very final player, they're going to look at their hand of cards and they're also going to try to figure out what they want to do. And they're going to go ahead and visit the police officer because they know that the police officer is going to be their one best bet at stopping some of the tragedies happening, because one of the goodwill powers of the police officer is he can stop a death. And we know death is what is going to cause this loop to come to an end. And now for the final reveal, we reveal exactly what is going to happen to all of our NPCs involved in this adventure. We know firstly the Mastermind is going to play a movement card on the doctor, moving the doctor to the city. The next thing that's going to happen is that this player is going to play a card on the police officer. That card is going to resolve, and the police officers are going to go ahead and gain 2 goodwill, which we know is a good thing because maybe we can use all that goodwill to stop the murder from occurring, which could help us possibly save the key player if that's what we think is going on here. Then finally, this player is going to play the forbid movement, not wanting to fall for the very first trap we fell for in the very first round, where this player simply moved up into the same area as the Shrine Maiden, causing an early death and an early loss of the game. Well, unfortunately, the Mastermind kind of planned for that. And it was kind of a bluff because we weren't actually moving. We were just creating a little bit of intrigue on the girl student. Now, is that intrigue a bluff, or do we have other ulterior motives? Either way, this forbidden movement card is removed from the game for this loop, which means it's pretty much gone for this game. And this intrigue card, also this Mastermind card, which is usable once per loop, is also going to be removed from the game. And we've got some more intrigue and some more puzzling things that the heroes are trying to figure out and find out the Mastermind still has one trick left up his sleeve. Finally, we're going to go ahead and gain 2 goodwill on this guy because our hero's thought process is that if he has the goodwill on him, he can remove paranoia. And we know that if paranoia happens, bad things happen to us last game. So we're going to go ahead and get that ability on him so we can at least prevent some of the paranoia. Unfortunately, the masterminds decided that they're going to go ahead and move the boy student out of the school, and he's going to go for a walk in the city, which means that she is all alone in the school. And we know what happens when she's alone in the school and people show up to visit her. Bad things happen for our story. So now a lot of things that happen for the storyline, we're done resolving cards. It's now time for the mastermind to play any abilities they want to use from the roles involved in the scenario. The mastermind on their turn decides that they're going to activate two abilities for two different heroes, or two different NPCs involved in this scenario. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to go ahead and add some paranoia, which is not a surprise to our heroes. What is going to be a surprise to our heroes is that the office worker is also going to gain some intrigue. And now our heroes have another clue if somebody's involved in this scenario, and we now should know all 5 of the roles involved in this scenario. We should definitely know what the scenario is as the protagonist. Now we just need to prevent the bad things from happening. Our heroes would love to use some of their goodwill powers that they have available, especially since the boy student has the ability to remove paranoia. Unfortunately, their ability to remove paranoia is only from another student, which means they can only remove paranoia from the girl student. Not something that's going to help us right now because she's full of intrigue, not full of paranoia. So unfortunately, there's no goodwill abilities that we can use. We know there's no incident since we're still on day number 1. So we're simply going to change the leader for the round. We're going to come to the night phase where fortunately, we're not going to get any bad news from the mastermind. It's now going to be the end of the first day. We're now going to move to the second day where we know there's going to be a murder. We know who is supposed to be murdered. We know how they're going to be murdered. We just need to stop it from happening. It's now the start of the second day. It's time for our mastermind to decide exactly which actions they're going to do in the city. We're going to go ahead and play one card down right here. We're going to play a second card on top of the police officer. Sorry, our first card was on top of the shrine maiden. Our second card is going to be on top of the police officer. And finally, our third card, we're going to go ahead and play on the office worker. That's everything the mastermind wants to do for all their actions. It's now time for our heroes to decide what kind of cards they want to play to stop whatever they think is about to happen. It's now time for our heroes to figure out exactly what they want to do, prevent all the tragedies from happening, ending the loop and costing them the game. Starting with the leader, they need to look at all their cards and figure out exactly where they want to go and what they want to do. Well, the very first thing they're going to do is they have a pretty good idea of what's going on right here because they know this person's all alone, which happens to be a very nice target for the mastermind. So this player has an idea of what they're going to do, so they're going to go ahead and play a card right down right here. The next player is going to look at all their cards, look at everything that is available to them, and look at all their possible actions. And knowing what's going on in the prior scenarios, what's going on in the prior days, and knowing that there's going to be an event this day, and having a pretty good idea of what's going to cause that event, they're going to go ahead and visit the office worker and try to prevent bad things from happening. And then finally, our final hero is going to look at all their cards, try to figure out exactly what they're going to do. And knowing that if we can get the police officer on our side, it may help us a lot. So we're going to go ahead and try to contact the police officer and see if he can give us any leads to help us defeat this horrible tragedy. And now we come down to a very, very tense reveal during the second day because things are hanging on the wire. There's very many different ways things can go for our heroes and also go for the mastermind. Hopefully things are going to go on the way of our heroes. The very first thing we're going to do is this player played a forbid movement card in anticipation of the shrine maiden possibly moving down in the school and killing the schoolgirl, which we know last time that happened, things went very, very bad for us. So the forbid movement counteracts the movement card, so the movement card is removed from the game. Since it is the final loop, the movement card is not removed from the game. It goes back to the mastermind, but the forbid movement card, since it's a once per loop, is going to be removed from the game because we're in the final loop. So the shrine maiden is going to stay exactly where she was. The next thing that's going to happen is the hero card is going to resolve. We're going to remove one paranoia from the office worker because our heroes have a pretty good idea what happens to him when he gets too darn paranoid. Unfortunately, the mastermind is going to do something very strange. He's going to put one more intrigue on the office worker, and our heroes are starting to realize exactly what's going to happen here. Again, if they're not careful, and this -1 paranoia card is also going to be removed for the rest of the loop. And then finally, we're going to come to the police officer, who's going to resolve his goodwill +2, making our heroes very, very happy, because they now know they have access to one of his goodwill powers, so our heroes are very happy about what they get from this. Unfortunately, things are going to go very south for them because they just saw exactly what the mastermind truly was planning for a horrible event that's going to happen in the shrine at the end of the night. The mastermind gets to use any abilities they want to use, and as a matter of fact, they do happen to want to use one of their abilities of one of the people involved in this scenario as our heroes start realizing that doom has come for them very, very quickly. They're going to look at all their possible goodwill powers now that the mastermind is done with everything he wants to do. They could use his goodwill power, but it's not really going to help them since the tragedy or the incident hasn't occurred yet. So that's going to end that part of the phase. Our heroes can be happy to know that no incident occurs on the second day, so there isn't a murder, so the leader is going to change. But the mastermind can happily let our heroes know that there is a tragedy that does occur. It doesn't end the game, but our police officer has been slain. As the mastermind at the start of day 3, I'm becoming quite smug because I'm pretty sure no matter how things play out, I have so many options to win the game now. I'm pretty sure I have the game, but still, just to be sure, may want to do a little bit of bluffing, a little bit of smart play, and try to fake out the other players. Or maybe I'm just going to keep doing what I've been doing all along. I'm going to go ahead and play one card down on the Shrine Maiden. Could it be a movement? Could it be a paranoia? Could it be an intrigue? Our heroes definitely don't know. I'm going to play one card on the girl student. Again, no idea what card I'm playing. That's what the heroes need to figure out. And then finally, I'm going to play a card on the office worker. Again, pretty sure I've just sealed my victory. It's now up to our heroes to play cards down, trying to stop exactly what I've done to stop my victory, hopefully saving them and making it through one more day, which brings them one day closer to possibly winning the game. It's now time for our heroes to start playing cards, and they have to play very, very smart because things are looking very, very bad for our heroes pretty darn quickly, especially if some of these cards come out to cause us problems, judging by the rules that are currently in the scenario. So starting with the leader, they're going to go ahead and play a card down. Hopefully they're gambling and gambling well and saving their skin at least for one more day, because all we need to do is make it through one more day after the third day, and we as the heroes win. The second hero is going to look at all their cards, trying to figure out exactly what they're doing. Again, not allowed to know what the other player's card they played. All they know is that they played a card on the Shrine Maiden. Well, this player decides that they want to hedge their bets, go ahead and visit the girl's student. Hopefully this card will help save them, maybe, at least for one more day. And finally, this player, starting to realize what has been causing a lot of their problems and looking at all the rules and realizing that they need to do something very, very quickly, they decide to go visit the doctor. Now they're pretty sure about what role the doctor is playing in this scenario. That's all the cards for all of our players. It's time to resolve these cards in order. And we'll go ahead and start over here in the city with the very first card. We're going to play a movement card for the heroes, which will move the doctor up into the hospital, and our heroes will be very, very happy because they think they've just figured out exactly what the mastermind was doing. The next thing we'll resolve is we'll go ahead and resolve the Shrine Maiden. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to see a forbid movement and a movement card, which means that we gambled, and we gambled extremely well, and it paid off for us in the long run. And then next we're going to come over here to the girl student, and we're going to figure out that we're going to get a movement card played by the hero, meaning that she's going to move over into the city. This card is going to be returned to our heroes. This card is going to give one paranoia to her. And anybody who's played for this scenario before knows exactly what's going to happen now, but don't spoil the surprise because we're going to go ahead and reveal the final card. It's an intrigue card. We now have 4 intrigue on the office worker. Again, look at all the rules, look at everything that's going on, and look at exactly what is still left to happen, and see if you can figure out if our heroes are going to survive through one more day. It's now time for our heroes to decide if they want to do anything with goodwill abilities, because our mastermind has gladly decided that they don't want to use any of their special abilities because they're quite happy with the results they're about to see. So the heroes decide to use the goodwill ability of the boy student to go ahead and remove the paranoia from the girl student, thinking that on day 3 they may be perhaps stopping the incident from happening. So our heroes are feeling pretty happy for themselves until the mastermind looks at them, advises them they can change the leader. Then with a nice smile, the mastermind looks at all of our heroes and informs them that at the end of the night, all three of our heroes have died. The tragedy loop has ended. That is the final loop. Our heroes have lost the game. Our mastermind has changed history, and the course of history has been permanently changed. Now, normally when our players lose in this way, they get one more chance to possibly pull victory out of the jaws of defeat in a normal scenario if they can figure out every single role of every single NPC involved in this scenario. They still manage to win the scenario. Now, in the very basic scenario, that's not a rule. That rule has been removed from the basic scenario because it makes the game a little bit easier. But for those of you playing along at home, I'll give you one more chance to see if you can win the game. Can you figure out what role the boy student played? Do you know what role the girl student played? Can you figure out exactly the role of the shrine maiden? Do you know the role of the police officer? I'm sure you know the role of the office worker, but do you know the role of the doctor? I hope you enjoyed this more thematic playthrough of a board game, looking at the game Tragedy Looper, a game that definitely deserved a more thematic playthrough than the standard just moving pieces across the board, because this is definitely one of those games that survives not only on the mechanics, admittedly, which are a little bit on the simpler side, it's basically moving pieces and playing cards, but this game also definitely survives on the intrigue, the mind games, and definitely the theme of the game. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or questions, always leave them in the YouTube comments below. If you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe. Stick around for my final review of Tragedy Looper while I give you my final thoughts of the game. And it's probably going to be a dead giveaway of what my final thoughts are, but stay tuned anyways. All the pieces are now in play. It's now time for the mastermind to change history. And the mastermind has fully changed history for life.